Good morning, everybody. My name is Sarah McVicker, and I'm the creator of the Facebook page Trauma Talks and the author of recently published book called What Made My Family Ill and Healing Through Self-Love. So I'm just sitting here today working on a course that I'm writing on identifying and healing childhood emotional trauma. I'm just having a cup of tea waiting for my lighthouse cousin Mary to arrive, and she should be here any second, as a matter of fact. Here she is.
Hi there,
Mary.
Sarah.
That was great timing.
Yes. How's you been?
I'm
Good.
good.
You got some tea on the go there?
I absolutely do. I was just going to
That's
have a
good.
sip of mine, and I just
I'd
poured,
love to have a cup of tea.
just poured yours.
Oh, thank
There
you very
go.
much. Have a little sip of this before we get going.
Awesome. Me too.
It's nice and strong, just the way I like it. Beautiful mugs, too.
Thank you.
So you're working on some new material, I think?
Yeah, I always seem to be writing something. Just sitting here putting a few ideas on paper. Always with my pen and paper.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I hear that you're going to be teaching a course in the fall on your book and the content in your Trauma Talks. That sounds
Yeah.
very interesting.
Yeah, I think it does. And I'm excited about it. You have read the book, haven't you, Mary?
I have.
Yeah, and you're a follower of Trauma Talks.
I am.
Yeah, from your perspective then, I would love to know what you think people that might be interested in taking a course on trauma, what do you think that they'd be interested in learning about trauma?
We're related. Your mother, Veronica, is my aunt, so I've known you and your family my whole life. But people who don't know you and haven't read your book yet, they might be wondering exactly what kind of trauma are you going to be focusing on in this course?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because heaven knows there's enough different kinds of trauma, isn't there?
Yes, there is.
Yeah, the kind of trauma that I'm going to be talking about is what my book pretty much covers. My experience with emotional trauma in childhood was the kind of trauma that a child experiences who lives within a family dynamic that doesn't demonstrate nurturing between parents and children. And unintended, but nevertheless demonstrated between parents and children in that way. And that would be things like the cuddling you would do with a child, picking up, playing, talking to a child, being affectionate generally, things like that.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a pretty good topic, because I think a lot of us assume that that was just part of life back in that era between parents and kids. And so you believe that this kind of day-to-day life from a very young age is traumatic for children? Is that right?
Yes, I do. And it's yes, it's definitely my belief as having experienced it. And I agree with you that it has been underestimated because of what you mentioned.
Yes.
About we all had, back then, we all had an element of that in our lives. And I think because of that relationship that with busy parents and children and having different roles than we do now,
Mm-hmm.
I think that for that reason we have sort of tossed the idea of that being traumatized aside, because it was common for many of us to have
Yes,
that
sure
kind
was.
of lifestyle, right?
Yes.
So, but in saying that, it's not just my belief. This is now supported by science and research that there is definitely a correlation between the stress that a child feels early in life and some very definite symptoms that can start cropping up in a child. In fact, there was a there was a study done by a doctor by the name of Tally Barham, and she and her team discovered a hormone that's created in the brain that affects cognition in children at young ages, that really does some rewiring neurologically with kids when they're not experiencing a normal relational life with parents and family. Of course, some other things we all might have seen, emotional problems in children.
Sure. Very interesting.
Yeah, behavioral
Yes.
problems in kids that seem to just come from nowhere. And the biggest, though, the biggest kicker for me in my life that affected all of my life was the separation between myself and a loving relationship with people in my family, parents and
Yes.
siblings. It was something that was just not experienced.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I forgot to mention a little earlier on there, knowing you and your family for as long as I have, this topic is very interesting to me. So
Yes, I
It-
believe
it's-
it would be.
it's very serious stuff.
Yeah.
And a lot of us have probably never thought of it, but maybe as we're getting older, we start to think about these things. So I think
Yes.
that's a great place for you to start in your course.
I
So
think
that
so.
that people can understand what happens to children and where these problems can start.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's very important to finally be able to focus on this. Yes, emotional trauma in children from lack of nurturing is finally in the 21st century being recognized as a trauma. And all of our young lives, of course, it wasn't, Mary, right?
Yes.
So now it is finally being given a place legitimately, medically, scientifically, under the spectrum of post-traumatic stress disorder. Although it differs from the typical PTSD that we all know of as you know, a kind of a trauma that's linked with one particular event in a person's life, like war or a terrible
Yes.
experience, whereas the link between this kind of emotional trauma in a child is called complex PTSD.
Right.
And the
Very-
word complex simply means it's incremental and ongoing from childhood on until, of course, it's healed at whatever point in life. Hopefully that'll be everybody someday.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. But I would love to have the opportunity to sit in a room of interested and like-minded people that are involved or at least interested in this topic, and that we can just throw around our experiences and ideas and just use our words to talk about a very
Yes.
important
And
topic.
I think a lot of people will be interested in doing that.
Yeah, and of course over a cup of tea.
Absolutely. So, speaking of tea, would you like a little bit of hot?
I'd love some hot.
I'll get that for you.
Go into the kitchen.
Thank you very much. I'll
Thank
get that,
you.
yes.